closed business environment, we're making so much damn money that we don't need anyone else to help us do what we already think we're quite good at. Other people may disagree.
But could that sort of thinking be influenced rather by them actually moving towards a cloud-based environment, which would then ask the question if everything's going to be delivered off the cloud? Would there
in my opinion, hardly get a more cloudy environment than the mobile phone marketplace. You know, you want to buy a phone, you want to buy an Apple. With the iPad, the whole idea, as I understand it, it doesn't even have a USB port, right? Because you can go online and shop at the company store.
But it doesn't have a floppy drive, right?
By the way, these devices where we're not being invited, but outsiders aren't being invited to help have ignite security debate about them, even though they're kind of as powerful as the iPhone is kind of the same sort of thing as your Mac. They're being treated as separate, out-of-bound devices for two-factor authentication, which to me seems ultra crazy. That we're trusting them to perform specialized cryptographic, tamper-proof cryptographic functionality to help us do, say, internet banking on our PCs. Whereas in fact, they're kind of two sides of the same coin.
I mean, say once again, leading on what you just said, right? Given the fact that in the iPad, for example, and probably other tablets as they come up, which plugs everything off the network, whether you call it cloud or whatever, would there then be any need for either desktop-based or device-based antivirus, IPSs, whatever you want to call it, or would everything just be done at the cloud and on the assumption that the device is going to be extremely safe, so you just catch it in the cloud?
That's actually a good point, because if you look at current mobile phone security, there's actually surprisingly large amounts of security being done completely behind the scenes, done by the mobile phone operators. For example, they do quite a bit of, again, depending on the operator, they do quite a bit of checking for validity of SMS messages, MMS messages. They do all kinds of filtering for GPRS data, like which websites people are accessing through the GPRS networks. And you can actually find this out if you do fuzzing and send malformed SMS messages. You'll actually have different kind of messages going through depending on which operator you have. Some operators detect that this SMS is corrupted and will block it because it could be a security problem. Other operators actually don't do this. And of course, they can block known malicious SMS messages, like, for example, Cold-Warrior multimedia messages, which basically is an attachment in the multimedia message, which is malicious. So there's lots of things that can be done in the cloud by the operator, but then there's lots of things that can never be done by the operator. For example, if I take my phone and go online at the local Starbucks through Wi-Fi, well, the operator doesn't see that at all, no matter how hard they try. Another thing, if you think about threats like Bluetooth leaking, so somebody's bleeding Bluetooth viruses from one device to another, the operator never sees that. There's nothing they can do to stop that. The only way to block malicious things happening over Wi-Fi, over Bluetooth, or other connections like that, or on your PC through USB stick, operator sees none of that. The only way to secure against those is local solution running on the endpoint device itself.
I agree. And if you look at something like I guess it sort of exists, Chrome OS or whatever Google called it. The idea is it's this whole thin client thing all over again, and we seem to be in a cycle in sort of history of computing where everything gets centralized, like mainframes, and then we need terminals that can access dumb terminals that can access those mainframes that end up like being 3270 terminals being in many ways more powerful than the computer themselves. And when Apple's Macs first came out, the most powerful product you could buy from Apple for a while was the laser writer, which you connected to. So the peripherals kind of outstrip the original devices, and that sort of seems to be starting to happen with these devices that don't need, that we're sort of told they may not need to be so secure because they have a much reduced sort of attack surface area. But given that most cloud stuff at the moment seems to be Ajax-based, whatever that means, is that you still need multitasking operating system, web browser, JavaScript engine, and a bunch of native code plugins, which sounds like an awfully complicated house of cards. And that's for a simple endpoint device.
Their whole point though is that you don't need a whole lot of data code plugins because there's not much data code. There's very little data code. You can sandbox applications, you can strip down the kernel of the system, and reduce that exposure by reducing.
Oh, sure. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but it's. I think in many ways, to the general public, it's sort of it's oversold. The apparent simplicity of something that works in the cloud is deeply oversold. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that all marketing is BS. But then again, the sandboxing only changes the way the attackers work. If you go back to Dennis's example of J2ME or Java mobile malware, which send text messages over from these single phones which aren't even running a smartphone operating system. Well, Java has a sandbox, and the sandbox on all mobile devices I've seen will warn you if the application you're running wants to send a text message. So the applications play tricks with the user. They explain that this is a useful application, and for it to operate, it's going to send an SMS, and then it sends an SMS. The user expects to see a prompt about the SMS being sent and will accept it. So, for example, you see applications which claim to speed up your web browsing on your mobile phone by moving some of the data over SMS, which makes no sense.
Yeah, it was the first Java to me SMS through web browser, 2006, 4 years ago, and these technologies are still working.
Okay, guys, but we have a question from the floor, Mr. Pixie.
Hello there. I'd like to follow up on something Jose mentioned earlier, which is given that most of these platforms allow users to install software, and that users will sometimes install software that does not rely on defects in the platform, like buffer overruns or bad kernel calls or anything else, in order to do things which are kind of borderline gray area, not in the best interests of that user, in exchange for giving them some kind of shiny object. Do any of you have a vision for how we're going to secure the future cybernetic universe, given that we still have humans operating the devices?
Well, I have a sort of idea. It's not really an idea. It's just like a little bit of a cynical view. Is that Mikko in his introduction said that if you imagine 30 years time, everything we have will be online. So our watch will go online, presumably to check that it still knows how to tell the time or something. Yeah. So maybe what we will have in 30 years' time is, and maybe you should invest now in companies like this, the mechanisms by which you can actually buy devices which by design can't connect to this ubiquitously available communications medium. And maybe we need some sort of social revolution, for example, in respect of something like Facebook, which I'm sorry, maybe I'm just an old fart, but I don't understand it. I don't understand how a friend can be a button you click. It's very convenient, and it makes you feel very popular. So, maybe unfortunately, maybe it's just going to take some really, really unfortunate sort of social disaster, murders or something like that, which has already happened related to Facebook. I mean, not Facebook's fault, in Sydney, for example. So maybe with some sort of decoupling, that people kind of discover their inner human self. So I guess there isn't a technological solution to that problem. Right? That you can have the most secure browser in the world, but when you connect to Facebook and willingly share all your stuff and authorize these invisible cloud applications to share stuff on your behalf and to sell the data to a third party, I'm afraid for that I genuinely don't have an answer.
There could be solutions, at least theoretical solutions, to block bad stuff that can be detected technically as bad stuff, like exploits. Like you come up with some kind of mechanism which would always be able to block exploits more or less. The problem is that, like you said, a big part of these things actually are bad on the paper. And a very good practical example of this is that none of the mobile malware cases in the mobile space, none of the 520 mobile malware families, none of those infect your device with an exploit. And that's very important, because if you look at how you get infected on your Windows box, well, you surf the web, you click on links, you get hit by an exploit for your QuickTime, for your PDF reader, for your Java sandbox, for Flash, for something. You get hit by exploits. For mobile phone, that has never happened. Never. Yes, we have found exploits for mobile phones. Yes, absolutely. We've never seen those used in the wild to infect somebody. This hasn't yet happened. So every single case, one way or another, relies on the user to download and install it, accept it, click on somewhere, click on. I mean, there's no exploits yet.
Some form of social engineering then.
Exactly, and that's important because if you look at the security model of mobile devices, which is all about everything's signed, everything's accepted, put into an app store or Symbian sign or whatever. None of that applies when you go to exploits, because you don't have to have your exploit signed just once.
By the way, Siemens signed